was a quiet night at the Hillsbury Town Hospital. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the trees, and the streetlights cast faint, sleepy shadows on the pavement. Inside the emergency wing, the soft glow of fluorescent lights washed over sterile white walls, giving the space a stillness that felt almost sacred. Nurses and doctors on the night shift exchanged hushed conversations, while the sound of pens scribbling on charts and footsteps echoing down empty corridors filled the silence. No one expected anything out of the ordinary. It was a night like any other, steady, uneventful, calm, until the automatic doors at the main entrance slid open without warning. Every head in the room turned toward the entrance, anticipating a patient or a frantic family member. But no one expected what stepped through. A large German shepherd, dust-covered, with a tangled coat and dirt clinging to his fur, walked in slowly. His eyes, though weary, held no fear, only resolve. In his jaws, he carried something, a bundle carefully wrapped in an old cloth. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady beep of a heart monitor nearby. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as a nurse slowly approached the dog. She hesitated, her hands slightly trembling, her eyes fixed on the bundle held gently in the dog's mouth. Remus stood completely still. He didn't growl, didn't show any sign of aggression, only his eyes that reflected both urgency and an almost unnatural calm. As the nurse bent down and carefully took the bundle from his jaws, it felt as if the entire emergency room was swallowed by a wave of absolute silence. Inside the old worn cloth was a newborn baby, tiny, pale. His breathing was faint, his chest rising and falling irregularly. His skin turned icy cold the moment her hand touched it. "Oh my God, it's a baby," the nurse gasped, her voice shaken and hoarse. No orders were needed. The doctors and nurses sprang into action. A gurney was pulled in, oxygen prepared in seconds, and every piece of equipment was gathered around the fragile little boy. No one stopped to ask why or how. It was second nature for them. Save the life first. While the room swirled in a storm of emergency action, Remus remained at the entrance, unmoving, but his eyes never left the child, as if he understood that the baby's life was still hanging by a thread. That gaze wasn't just from an animal, it was the look of a silent guardian, one carrying a final mission. Everyone could feel something was different. It was as if this dog knew exactly what he was doing, as if someone had placed their full trust in him to carry out the impossible. The baby was gently laid on the emergency table. As the worn cloth was peeled back, something slipped out. A small, crumpled piece of paper, damp, stained with mud. A nurse picked it up and read softly, "Micah, his name is Micah." No one said a word. There was no time to question how the name was written or who left it. The only thing that mattered was this: Micah was hovering on the edge of life. A doctor leaned in, pressing 2 fingers gently against the baby's chest. Very faint, irregular heartbeat, almost no breathing. The monitor pulsed with scattered, shallow beeps. Another doctor called out, "Start fluids, oxygen mask, move." The room shifted from silence to controlled chaos. Wheels rolled, packages tore open, voices rang out, urgent but focused. Micah lay there, fragile and nearly translucent, his tiny frame almost too delicate to exist. A nurse adjusted the oxygen mask over his small face, while another slid an IV into his miniature vein, her hands barely steady under the weight of pressure. In the corner, Remus, the German shepherd who had carried Micah here, stood watching. But now he began to move around the room, circling slowly, deliberately. He wasn't panicking, he wasn't pacing, he was watching. Each movement, each person, like a seasoned soldier monitoring the battlefield. He stepped closer to the emergency table, ears perked, eyes locked on the baby. Then, with a controlled leap, Remus placed his front paws on the edge of the table, lifting himself just enough to see Micah clearly. He didn't interfere, he didn't bark, he simply watched, intensely. In his eyes there was no fear, there was no doubt, only a silent plea. One of the doctors paused for a moment, meeting Remus's gaze. No one shooed him away, because everyone in that room felt this dog hadn't just delivered a baby. He had entrusted them with something sacred. "Heart rate is improving, just a little," a nurse whispered. A breath of relief passed through the room, not celebration, but a crack in the wall of despair. Micah wasn't safe yet, but he had a chance. Remus slowly stepped down from the table, walked toward the door, and lay down. His head rested between his front paws, his eyes never straying from the child. A nurse murmured, "If it weren't for this dog, Micah wouldn't be here." And the dog stayed there, still watching, standing guard until life fully returned. News of the strange event spread quickly throughout the hospital. A German shepherd appearing in the middle of the night with a dying infant in its jaws. This was no ordinary emergency. Less than an hour later, the police were called to investigate where the baby had come from. Detective Harris was the first to arrive in the emergency wing. A quiet man with years of experience under his belt, he had seen his share of bizarre cases, but nothing quite like this. A nurse approached him, her voice still trembling. "We don't know who the baby's mother is. All we know is the dog brought him in, placed him on the floor, and just stood there." Harris followed the direction she pointed, and there was Remus, lying calmly near the entrance. Despite the unfamiliar presence of police officers, Remus showed no fear or aggression, but his eyes remained sharp, always fixed on the room, and more specifically, on Micah. "Has anyone scanned him for a chip?" Harris asked, his tone firm. A young officer stepped forward, holding a scanner. He approached Remus slowly, carefully, but as the device got too close, Remus backed up, body stiff, sending a clear but calm warning. No growl, just caution. "This dog's been trained," the officer said under his breath. "Looks like a retired canine." Harris nodded, then took a slow step toward Remus, his hands empty, his voice low and steady. "Easy, buddy. I'm not here to hurt anyone." Remus stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his head, allowing Harris to attach a leash to his worn collar. "Good boy," Harris murmured. "Now show me where you came from." He stood motionless. His eyes weren't on Harris, not on the officers, but locked on the emergency room, where Micah was still fighting for each breath. "Come on, buddy, take me there," Harris coaxed softly. But Remus didn't budge. Harris furrowed his brow, then followed the dog's gaze, and he understood. He turned to the medical team. "What's the baby's status?" A nurse responded quickly. "More stable, still weak, but his heartbeat steadier. We're monitoring him closely." Harris stepped closer to Remus, lowering his voice. "You heard that, didn't you? He's still here. He's going to be okay, I promise." Remus stared at him, eyes unreadable, holding that gaze for one long heartbeat, as if weighing the truth behind the words. And then he gave a small, slow nod, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. Only then did Remus turn around and begin walking down the hospital corridor, his stride steady, his burden eased, if only for now. The night sky hung heavy with a thin veil of mist as Remus led the way out of the hospital. Patrol cars followed slowly behind, their headlights casting a hazy glow on the damp pavement. Remus didn't hesitate. His steps were steady, deliberate. He didn't look back, didn't wait for instruction. The officers followed silently, a strange mix of skepticism and reverence tugging at their minds, as if they were part of some sacred procession. And Remus, its guide. He led them down 2 streets, across a vacant lot and into the heart of the town's eastern edge, a neighborhood long forgotten. The houses here were old, weathered, their windows broken, lawns overgrown, fences rusted through. The air was thick with the scent of decay and time. Finally, Remus stopped in front of a small, crumbling home. The roof sagged and the front door hung ajar, like someone had left in a hurry. Detective Harris raised his hand, signaling the team. "Stay sharp, move in slow." Flashlights clicked on. They stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything. The floorboards creaked beneath their boots. Dust blanketed everything. A sour smell wafted from the kitchen, spoiled food long abandoned. But Remus didn't pause. He moved through the cluttered living room, past overturned chairs and scattered papers, heading straight for a small door at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly open. Behind it, a tiny, cold room awaited. In the corner sat a dust-covered crib. Beside it, an empty dog bowl, a worn blanket, and a few small toys strewn across the floor. Remus approached the crib, lowered his head, and sniffed gently, confirming what everyone now understood. This was where Micah had once lain. Detective Harris stepped forward, his flashlight sweeping the room. No one said a word, but in their faces, the truth had settled. They had just found the beginning of this incredible story. The air inside the small room felt thick, like time itself had paused. Beams from the officers' flashlights moved slowly across the cracked walls, illuminating remnants of a life that once existed here, filled with love, now abandoned by despair. Remus didn't charge in or sniff wildly. Instead, he walked calmly toward the dust-covered crib, his gaze soft and solemn, like someone returning to sacred ground. He stopped in front of the crib, placed his front paws gently on the worn wooden edge, and lowered his head, inhaling deeply, as if trying to relive a memory, a scent, a connection that could not be spoken. Then he sat down beside it, his body curled close, resting his head near the floor. No barking, no movement, only his eyes, guarding, grieving, remembering. Detective Harris stood in silence. He'd seen brave K9S before, search dogs, trackers, but never a dog that radiated such raw emotion. Suddenly, Remus rose. He turned, glanced at Harris with unmistakable purpose, then walked toward the kitchen. Harris hesitated, then followed, flashlight trailing the dog's silent path. Remus stopped at an old wooden table. He nudged a crumpled envelope gently with his nose, then stepped back, offering it. Harris bent down and picked it up. Inside, a faded, handwritten note trembled between his fingers. He read aloud, "I tried. I did everything I could, but I can't keep going. Everything around me is falling apart. I have nothing left but Remus. And I believe he'll know what to do. Please forgive me. Please save my child." The house fell into a silence so deep it felt like the walls were holding their breath. A young officer looked away, eyes brimming. Harris whispered she put everything, her last hope, in Remus. Then, turning toward the dog, he asked softly, "Who are you to her?" There was no answer, but Harris understood. In the corner of the room, a fallen photo frame caught his eye. He picked it up. A young woman held a newborn in her arms. Standing beside her was Remus, wearing a K9 service vest. An officer behind him murmured, "Records say Remus used to serve with the city police unit, was retired a few years ago, adopted by a civilian." Harris nodded slowly. Now it all made sense. Elena had taken Remus in after his service, and now Remus had simply returned the debt in the only way he knew how, by protecting the one thing she loved most. As the final words of the letter echoed in the room, no one on the team had any doubt left. This wasn't abandonment. It was a desperate cry for help, spoken through the last fragments of a mother's broken heart. Detective Harris immediately ordered an expanded search. Using the photograph from the frame and tips from neighbors, the team spread out through public areas across town. An elderly man at the end of the block recalled, "I remember her, always with a big dog. Probably this one, haven't seen her in days. Last time she looked thin, sick. She took the baby out, then vanished." That testimony opened the first door. After several hours of searching, a call came in from a park security guard on the north side of town. A woman had been sitting motionless on a bench, unresponsive and visibly unwell. When Harris and his team arrived, Elena was hunched over on the cold bench, wrapped in a torn coat, arms crossed tightly as if shielding herself from the world. Her hair was tangled, her face pale and distant. She flinched when they approached, but didn't run. Harris sat down beside her, voice gentle. "We found a baby boy. A dog led us to him. Do you know anything about that child?" Elena turned sharply. The emptiness in her eyes lit up with panic and hope. Her voice cracked. "Micah? Is it Micah? My son? Is he alive?" The tears came in waves, uncontrollable. Harris nodded slowly. "He's safe. He's receiving care now." Elena collapsed into herself, hands covering her face as her body trembled with emotion. She whispered again and again, "Thank you. Thank God. Thank you, Remus." Immediately, as if a heavy rock was lifted from her chest, Elena broke down in tears. She buried her face in her hands, her entire body trembling. I thought I had lost him forever," she sobbed. "I have no one left, only Remus." The officers stood in silence. Harris didn't interrupt, just let her speak. Elena looked up, her face still wet with tears. "Remus? He means everything to me. My father adopted him when I was in middle school. He wasn't a pet, he was family." She paused, her eyes sinking deep into memory. "I grew up with Remus. When I fell, he sat beside me. When my father died of a stroke, Remus sat beside the casket. From that day on, he never left me." Harris tilted his head, listening silently. "Then I got pregnant, and Micah's father left without a word. Everything collapsed. I lost my job, lost my home, lost my will to live. But Remus didn't leave. He still looked at me like I was strong enough to get through it." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't take care of my son anymore. I was exhausted. I was starving. But Micah, he still had hope. And I knew Remus would never abandon him." She looked at Harris with swollen red eyes. "I told Remus, take my son to the place where you know people will help him. And he did." No one spoke. No one questioned her story or saw it as absurd, because they had seen it with their own eyes. That this dog had not only saved a life, but had fulfilled a silent vow without needing words. Harris gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remus is a warrior, and what he did is something every one of us will forever owe him for." When the ambulance brought Elena back to the hospital, the first light of dawn had begun to stretch across the sky. The street lamps faded slowly, replaced by the soft pink hue of a new day, a day Elena never thought she would live to see. Though her body was drained to the bone, she forced herself to sit up on the stretcher, gripping the blanket tightly. Her eyes locked on the end of the hallway where someone waited, someone she believed she had lost forever. Remus walked beside her, untethered, unguided. His steps were steady with purpose, as though he were not following, but leading the broken pieces of a family back toward the light. His shadow stretched long across the floor, but his presence was solid, grounded in loyalty and quiet strength. The pediatric ward doors opened. A doctor gave a small nod. The stretcher rolled forward, entering a room filled with gentle morning light. On the small hospital bed lay Micah. His eyes still closed, but his cheeks pink again. His breathing calm and rhythmic, as if the brutal fight for survival had slowly faded. The moment Elena saw him, she shot up like a jolt of life had returned to her veins. She rushed to his side, unable to hold back the flood. "Micah, my baby, I am very sorry." Her fingers trembled as they touched his cheek, tracing the soft curve of a face she thought she'd never see again. Then she wrapped her arms around him, holding him as if afraid he might disappear. The tears came in waves, silent sobs from a soul that had lived through too much sorrow. She said nothing else, because no words were needed. It was all in his breath, in the warmth of his skin, in the heartbeat pulsing softly under her hand. That moment was everything: redemption, salvation, love, life. As the room stood in silence, witnessing the scene, Remus remained at the doorway. He didn't step inside, as if he understood this moment was sacred. But his gaze never wavered. His ears were perked, his breath calm, his body was still. But every part of him was alert, ready to shield that child from the world. Then, slowly, Remus walked forward, each step measured like entering hallowed ground. He sat beside the bed and lowered his head to the mattress. A silent bow, a final confirmation. The child is safe. Then he lay down, between Elena and Micah, not intruding, not demanding, just close enough to become their quiet protector, the silent guardian of two souls finally reunited. A nurse knelt beside him, gently ran her fingers through his dusty fur, and whispered, "You're a hero, Remus. No one else could have done what you did." Remus didn't look up. He only wagged his tail softly, a nod as if to say, "I know." Elena turned to him, tears still streaming down her face. "Thank you for never leaving us, for going in my place, for coming back with my son in your care." No one in the room could speak. Doctors, nurses, officers, and social workers all stood still, knowing they had just witnessed something beyond belief, a testament not of miracles, but of unwavering loyalty and unconditional love. A few days later, the hospital room felt completely different. The constant beeping of critical monitors had faded, replaced by the soft laughter of nurses, the jingling of meal carts, and sometimes the quiet lullaby Elena sang while sitting beside her son's bed. Micah had survived. Though still fragile, he had begun to open his eyes, gently grasp his mother's fingers, and even smile faintly whenever she spoke. For Elena, these were miracles, life returning from the edge of death. She was no longer the woman collapsed on a park bench. She was rebuilding. Thin, tired, but with a new fire in her eyes. The fire of a mother who now knew she was no longer alone. Remus still lay beside the hospital bed, sometimes resting, sometimes jumping up when a doctor checked on Micah. He never left their side. The hospital staff had grown used to his presence, a quiet sentinel, the watchful soul of a family reborn. Their story spread quickly through the community, and then another miracle came. When Elena was discharged, she stepped out of the hospital with Micah in her arms, under a brilliant morning sun. At the front steps, dozens of people were waiting, strangers, but each holding something: baby clothes, food, diapers, envelopes, and even job offers. A middle-aged woman stepped forward, taking Elena's hand. "We don't know you, but we know how strong you are. If you need a job, my bakery could always use someone honest." Elena cried. She had once believed the world to be cold, but now she realized sometimes all it takes is a single light to pull an entire life out of the darkness. With help from social workers, she was given temporary housing in a small apartment. Remus was offered his own bed made of old towels, but he always chose to sleep beneath Micah's crib every night. During those first nights in their new home, Elena would sit by the window, watching her son sleep peacefully and Remus curled beneath him. She whispered, "We made it, Remus, because of you." There was no reply, only Remus's eyes, calm and knowing, as if he understood, as if he knew he had fulfilled a promise made long ago, to the father who once rescued him, to the girl who grew up by his side, and now to the baby he carried back to life. The story of Elena, Micah, and Remus slowly became a living symbol in their community. No one spoke of them with pity anymore. They spoke with reverence. A single mother did not break. That fragile child was not abandoned. And that quiet dog? He wasn't a pet. He was a hero who never needed a medal. There's something deeper than family in this story. It's trust, placed where no one would have thought to place it. It's love, given without condition, without expectation of return. Elena once lost everything, her family, her home, her hope, but in the end she regained it all, because there was one soul who never turned his back on her, even when the world had. Remus didn't speak, but in silence he did what many humans could not. He kept a promise no one had asked him to keep. He didn't need praise. He only needed to know. The child lived, the mother returned, the family was whole again. And sometimes that's all a true hero ever wants. 5 years had passed since the day Remus carried Micah to the hospital. Elena and Micah's life had changed. No more sleeping on cold floors, no more aching hunger. No more nights drowned in silent tears. They had a warm little home now, a garden full of green, and quiet mornings bathed in sunshine. Micah was now 6, bright, curious, full of laughter. He didn't remember everything from that day, but in his heart, Remus was an inseparable part of his childhood. He called Remus my loyal buddy, my nighttime guard, the hero without a cape. Every day, Remus walked beside Micah, escorting him to school, waiting patiently by the gate, playing ball in the backyard. Elena would often joke, "I think Remus worries about you more than I do." And Micah would grin, throwing his arms around the old dog's neck. Elena still told him the story. Under warm lamps or beside the winter fire, she would say softly, "You know, Remus brought you back to life. If not for him, I would have had nothing left to hold." Remus had grown old. His fur had turned silver, his steps were slower, his ears not as sharp. But his eyes, they stayed the same, calm, loyal, and deeply knowing. That day was a beautiful afternoon. The three of them, Elena, Micah, and Remus, sat beneath the old tree in their garden. Leaves rustled gently overhead, a breeze swept through the branches. Micah chatted excitedly about school while Elena listened, smiling at the two loves of her life. Remus lay between them, his head resting against Micah's leg. He didn't bark, didn't move, just lay there as he had so many times before. But this time, something felt different. Micah glanced down. "Mom, is Remus sleeping?" Elena leaned over, placed her hand on his back. She froze. No breath, no heartbeat, only stillness. Silence fell. Then Elena whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "He's finished his mission." Micah didn't cry right away. He moved closer, wrapped his arms around Remus, resting his head on that soft fur. "I love him, Mom." Elena wiped her tears, leaned in, and kissed Remus gently on the forehead. "So do I, sweetheart, so do I." And under that old tree, bathed in golden light, Remus ended his journey of unwavering loyalty, beside the two souls he loved most. As the breeze stirred the leaves overhead, it felt as if the earth itself paused to honor him. He had lived without asking, served without question, and now he rested, not gone, but carried forever in their footsteps, in every sunrise they'd witness without him. Perhaps we'll never truly understand what goes on in the heart of a dog, but maybe we don't need to, because sometimes, in the silence between heartbeats, in the stillness of a final breath, a truth speaks louder than words. That love doesn't always need to be said. It just needs to be shown, again and again, until someone is saved. Remus didn't chase glory. He carried loyalty. And in doing so, he taught us that the greatest heroes don't wear uniforms or capes. Sometimes they simply walk beside us and stay.